Book of Heaven, Volume 18, Part 2. October 1st, 1925. The divine will is the center of the humanity of our Lord. The one who lives in it lives in this center. I was accompanying the pains of the passion of my sweet Jesus, according to my usual way, and I offered the very privation of him and the torture it caused me as attestation of my sorrowful love for his relief and as compassion for his pains. Now, while I was doing this, my beloved good moved one arm within my interior, raising his right hand and letting rivulets of blood and of light flow from his fingers over my poor soul that was withered and burned by the powerful blowing of his privation, and with such sadness that Jesus himself was shaken. And moved to compassion, wanting to cheer me, he said to me, "My daughter, courage, do not fear. The one who lives in my will is in the center of my humanity, because the divine will is in me, like the sun within its sphere. Even though the rays invade the earth, it never departs from up high, from its center. It remains always encircled within its sphere, in its majestic throne. And while its light reaches everywhere, dominating everything, everything serves as its footstool, as all await its beneficial light. So was my divine will within me, like center in the sphere of my humanity. And from my sphere started the light, reaching every one and every place. This had been the first act of man, to reject my supreme will. Therefore it was appropriate for my humanity to take the first step toward it, centralizing this eternal will within me as center of life, and bringing it to man once again through my life, my works, and pains, so that he might return to his Creator, placing himself in the order for which he had been created. Do you see then, my daughter? The soul who lives in my will is in the center of my humanity, and everything I did and suffered is all around her and for her help. If she is weak, it administers to her my strength. If shaded, my blood washes her and embellishes her. My prayers sustain her. My arms hold her tightly and cover her with my works. In sum, everything is for her defense and help. This is why the thought of my pains is as though natural in you, because since you live in my will, they surround you like many clouds of light and of grace. Within the sphere of my humanity, my will placed my works, my steps, my words, my blood, my wounds, my pains, and everything I did, as though on the way, in order to call man and give him sufficient aids and means to save him and make him come back again into the womb of my will. If my will had wanted to enter the field on its own in order to call man, he would have been frightened. Instead, I wanted to call him with everything I did and suffered, like many enticements, pushes, encouragements, and means to make him return into my arms. So everything I did and suffered is the carrier of man to God. Now the one who lives in my will by living in the center of my humanity, takes all the fruits of everything I did and suffered, and enters the order of creation. And my will fulfills in him the full purpose for which he was created. Others, then, who do not live in my will, find the means to be saved, but do not enjoy all the fruits of creation and of redemption. Now, while my lovable Jesus was saying this, I said to him, "My love, I don't know. You tell me that I live in your will, and then you leave me. Oh, what a hard martyrdom you make me go through. As you leave me, everything changes for me. I myself no longer recognize myself. Everything dies for me. The light dies, the love, the good. You alone maintain the beating of life in my poor soul. As soon as you depart and leave me, everything dies. See then in what hard and painful conditions you leave me. Oh, please have pity on me and do not leave me any more, for I can take no more." And while I wanted to say more, my Jesus, sighing, added, "My daughter, be quiet. Do not go any further. Your words wound my heart. Oh, how I would like to remove from your heart this nail so hard, that I leave you, that I might leave you. I too know that, for the one who loves me, this nail is unbearable. It kills one continuously, without pity. Therefore lay down the thought that I might leave you. You should be convinced that, instead of leaving you, I penetrate more deeply into you, and I remain silent in the little ship of your soul. And this is so true, that nothing has moved within you. The preparations that were there are still there. They are all in the order, so much so that it is enough for my will to want it, and I give a little spin to the preparations that are there, and quickly I am with you. And besides, how can I leave you? The one who does my will and lives in it maintains whole the bonds of creation that exist between creator and creature, the bonds of redemption, and the bonds between the sanctifier and the ones who are being sanctified. My will seals all these bonds and renders the creature inseparable from me. Therefore, be sure that your Jesus does not leave you." Now, while he was saying this, I saw as though many threads of light bound to my heart. Some of them were bound to all the created things. Other threads of light were coming out from all that Jesus had done and suffered. Others from the sacraments. May everything be for the glory of God and for the good of my soul and of all souls. Amen. October 4th, 1925. Repeating the same good serves to form the water with which to water the seed of the virtues. Everything that our Lord has done is suspended in the divine will, in waiting, to give itself to creatures. I was fusing myself in the most holy will of God, according to my usual way, and while making my round in it, to place my I love you upon all things, I wished that my Jesus would see or hear nothing but my I love you, or through this I love you of mine. And while repeating the sing-song of my I love you, I thought to myself, It shows that I am really a little child, who can say nothing but the little story she has learned. And then what good comes to me by repeating, I love you, over and over again? But while I was thinking of this, my adorable Jesus came out from within my interior, showing my I love you, impressed everywhere, in all of his divine person, on his lips, on his face, on his forehead, in his eyes, in the middle of his breast, on the back and in the center of the palms of his hands, on the tips of his fingers, in some, everywhere. And with a tender tone, he told me, "My daughter, aren't you happy that none of the I love yous that come out of you go lost, but all remain impressed in me? And then do you know what good comes to you by repeating them? You must know that when the soul decides to do some good, to exercise a virtue, she forms the seed of that virtue. By repeating those acts, she forms the water with which to water that seed in the earth of her heart. The more often she repeats them, the more she waters that seed, and the plant grows beautiful and green, in such a way that it quickly produces the fruits of that seed. On the other hand, if she is slow in repeating, many times the seed remains suffocated, and if it comes out at all, it grows thin and never gives fruit. Poor seed, without enough water in order to grow. My sun does not rise over that seed to give it fecundity, maturity, and a beautiful color to its fruits, because it is not fecund. On the other hand, by always repeating those same acts, the soul contains much water with which to water that seed. My sun rises over that seed every time it sees it being watered, and it delights so much, knowing that it has much strength in order to grow, that it makes its branches reach up to me. And in seeing its many fruits, I pick them with pleasure, and I rest under its shadow. So repeating your I love you for me procures for you the water with which to water and form the tree of love. Repeating patience waters and forms the tree of patience. Repeating your acts in my will forms the water with which to water and form the divine and eternal tree of my will. Nothing can be formed with one single act, but with many upon many repeated acts. Only your Jesus contains the virtue of forming all things, and the greatest things, with one single act, because I contain the creative power. But the creature, by dint of repeating the same act, forms the good she wants to do, bit by bit. Through habit, that good or that virtue becomes her nature, and the creature becomes the possessor of it, and it forms all of her fortune. This happens also in the natural order. No one becomes a teacher by having read the vowels and the consonants once or a few times, but by repeating them constantly, to the point of filling his mind, his will, and his heart with all that science that is needed in order to be able to be a teacher to others. No one feels satiated if he does not eat, bite after bite, the food that is needed in order to be satiated. No one harvests the seeds if he does not repeat, who knows how many times, his work in his little field. And so with many other things. To repeat the same act is a sign that one loves, appreciates, and wants to possess that very act that he does. Therefore repeat, and repeat incessantly, without ever tiring. Afterwards, I found myself outside of myself, and my sweet Jesus carried me around through all those places in which, while being on earth, he had operated, suffered, prayed, and also cried. Everything was in act, everything he had done. And my beloved good told me, "My daughter, daughter of my supreme volition, my will wants to make you take part in everything. Everything you see is all the works I have done while being on earth, that my will keeps suspended within itself, because creatures do not dispose themselves to wanting to receive them, partly because they still do not know what I have done. See, here are the prayers I did at night time, covered with bitter tears and with ardent sighs for the salvation of all. They are all in waiting to give themselves to creatures, in order to give them the fruits that they contain. Daughter, enter into them. Cover yourself with my tears. Clothe yourself with my prayers, so that my will may accomplish in you the effects that are in my tears, prayers, and sighs. My will keeps, as though lined up within itself, the pains of my childhood, all of my interior acts of my hidden life, that are prodigies of grace and of sanctity, all the humiliations, glories, and pains of my public life, and the most hidden pains of my passion. Everything is suspended. The complete fruit has not been taken by creatures, and I am waiting for the ones who must live in my will, so that they may no longer be suspended, but may pour themselves upon them, to give them their complete fruit. Only the ones who must live in my will shall make my goods no longer be suspended. Therefore, enter into my every act and pain, that my will may be fulfilled in you. Between you and me, I do not want suspended things, nor do I tolerate being unable to tell you what I want. This is why I want to find my own will in you, so that nothing may oppose what my will itself wants to give you." And while Jesus was saying this, I moved from one act of Jesus to another, and I remained as though transformed, covered with his own acts, prayers, tears, and pains. But who can say what I experienced? I hope that blessed Jesus shall give me the grace to correspond and to fulfill his adorable will in me and in all. Amen. October 10th, 1925. Exchange of wills between the Celestial Father and the Most Holy Virgin and Luisa. The Most Holy Virgin repeats for the soul who lives in the divine will what she did for her Son. As I was in my usual state, my poor mind found itself within an extremely high atmosphere. I seemed to see the divinity, and upon one knee of the Celestial Father, the Queen Mamma dead, as if she had no life. Surprised, I thought to myself, "My Mamma is dead. But what a happy death, to die on the knees of our Creator!" But looking more closely, I saw her will as though detached from her body, held in the hands of the Divine Father. Amazed, I looked, and I could not give myself a reason for what I was seeing. But a voice coming from the divine throne said, "This is the elect among all the elect. She is the all-beautiful. She is the only creature who gave us her will as gift, and left it dead upon our knees, in our hands. And we, in exchange, gave her the gift of our will. Greater gift we could not give her, because by acquiring this supreme will, she had the power to make the Word descend upon earth, and to have the redemption of mankind be formed. A human will would have no power nor attraction over us, but a divine will, given by ourselves to this incomparable creature, won over us, conquered us, enraptured us, and unable to resist, we surrendered to her petitions to make the Word descend upon earth. Now, we are waiting for you to come to die upon our other knee, giving us your will. And we, in seeing it dead in our hands, as if it no longer existed for you, shall give you the gift of our will. And through you, that is through this will of ours given to you, our Fiat shall return to live upon earth. These two wills, dead upon our knees, shall be the ransom for many rebellious wills, and we shall keep them as precious pledge that shall repay us for all the evils of the other creatures, because with our will they shall be able to satisfy us. The voice could no longer be heard, and I found myself on the other paternal knee, in the act of breathing my last and dying. But at that moment I found myself inside myself. But I am unable to say what I felt within me. Only I prayed from the heart that my will might never again enter into me, but only the divine might have life in me. Ah, it alone is the bearer of all goods, and the repeater of Jesus within souls, and echoing the fiat of creation. It embraces everything and everyone, as though in one breath, and requites God for the work of creation, redemption, and sanctification. The divine will operating in us can do anything. It is the true queen who reigns and rules over everything. Then afterwards I saw my celestial mamma with baby Jesus in her arms, as she kissed him and placed him to her breast to give him her most pure milk. And I said to her, "My mamma, and what about me? Don't you give anything to me? Oh, please allow me at least to place my I love you between your mouth and that of Jesus while you kiss, so that my little I love you may run within everything you do." And she said to me, "My daughter, please do. Place your little I love you, not only in the mouth, but in all the acts that pass between me and my son. You must know that everything I did toward my son, I intended to do toward those souls who were to live in the divine will, because by being in it, they would be disposed to receive all the acts I did toward Jesus, and I would find sufficient space in which to place them. So if I kissed my son, I kissed them, because I found them together with him in his supreme will. They were the first to be as though lined up within him, and my maternal love pushed me to let them partake in everything I did to my son. Great graces were needed for those who were to live in this holy will, and I placed all my goods, my graces, my sorrows, at their disposal, as their help, as defense, as strength, as support, and as light. And I felt happy and honored with the greatest honors to have as my children the children of the will of the Celestial Father that I too possessed. And therefore I looked at them also as births from me. Even more it can be said of them what is said about my son, that the first generations found salvation in the merits of the future Redeemer. In the same way, these souls, these future daughters, by virtue of the divine will operating in them, are the ones who incessantly implore salvation and graces for the future generations. They are with Jesus, and Jesus is in them. And they repeat together with Jesus that which Jesus contains. Therefore, if you want me to repeat for you what I did for my son, let me always find you in his will, and I shall be generous with my favors toward you. October 17th, 1925. The eternal wisdom has established that the food of man's soul be the will of God. After 2 days of most bitter privations of my highest good, Jesus, I felt him move in my interior. I seemed to see him in my interior, sitting, with his head leaning on one side, upon my shoulder, with his mouth turned to my mouth, in the act of administering the words to me. I clasped him to myself, and I began to listen to him, abandoning all of myself in him. So it seemed that he was saying to me, "My daughter, my will is more than food. Food gives strength to the body. It warms it. It increases the blood. It enlivens the intelligence if it is dim. It puts liveliness in all the members, and pushes the creature to new works and sacrifices. On the other hand, one who is on an empty stomach, not giving the necessary food to her body, is weak, cold, lacking in blood, her intelligence dim, exhausted in all of her members. And this leads her to melancholy, and pushes her to do nothing, with no desire to sacrifice herself in anything. Poor one, she feels life missing in all of her person. And this is so true that, when an illness is mortal for a creature, she abandons food. And by abandoning food, she disposes herself to death. Now, since the eternal wisdom has established that the soul too should have food, she was assigned the supreme will as delicious food. So the one who takes this food is strong in doing good. She is as though soaked with love for her God. This food increases the divine blood in order to form the growth of the life of God within her. Like sun, it is reflected in her intelligence, to make her know her Creator and be formed in his likeness. It puts liveliness in the whole soul in order to put all virtues in force, and it pushes her to new works and to sacrifices unheard of. The food of my will gives itself in every instant, at each breath, at night, during the day, in each thing, and as many times as one wants. Nor is there any danger, as with corporal food, that in taking too much of it, it may do harm and even produce illness. No, rather, the more one takes of it, the more it fortifies and raises the soul to the likeness of her Creator. One can remain with one's mouth always opened in the act of taking this celestial food. All the opposite for one who does not take this food of my will. For one who does not take it at all, it can be said that she disposes herself to die eternally. As for one who seldom feeds herself, she is weak and inconstant in good. She is cold in love. She is lacking in divine blood, in such a way that the divine life grows as though anemic within her. The light of her intelligence is so dim that she knows little or nothing of her Creator, and not knowing him, his likeness is so far away from her, for as much as she is far away from the food of his will. She is without liveliness in doing good, because she does not have sufficient food. And now patience escapes her. Now charity. Now detachment from everything. So the poor virtues live as though strangled, without enough food of my will. Ah, if one could see a soul without this celestial food, one would weep over her. So many are the miseries and the rubbish with which she is covered. However, there is more for one to compassionate if one sees a creature starved of corporal food, because many times she lacks the means in order to buy it. But the food of my will is given out for free. Therefore one who does not take it deserves condemnation, and the condemnation is formed by herself, because she has rejected the food that gave her life. Then afterwards I heard that various people had suffered contrasts, humiliations, and other things. And my sweet Jesus resumed his speaking. My daughter, just as the body contains bad blood that infects the good one, and it is necessary to apply vesicants, leeches, bloodlettings, in order to draw out the bad blood, otherwise one is in danger of remaining paralyzed for the rest of one's life. In the same way, the soul who lacks the continuous food of my will contains many bad humors, and it is necessary to apply the vesicants of humiliations in order to draw out the bad humor of self-esteem, the bites of leeches, in order to extract the infected humor of the vain glory of one's own self, immediate bloodlettings, to block and draw out the bad blood of the little attachments that she keeps forming in her heart toward the people whom she approaches in doing good. Otherwise, those humors would grow so much as to infect everything she does, in such a way as to remain paralyzed in good for the rest of her life. Punctures always do good. They are the sentries of the heart that maintain the blood pure. That is, the intention of the soul upright in doing good. Therefore, if all did good only in order to fulfill my will, punctures would not be necessary, because my will is the safeguard against all bad humors. So punctures are also the penalties for those who do not take enough food of my will. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 18, Part 2. Fiat.